Why is influence so important?
Find out on this episode of LED Live.
Light exposing darkness.
Welcome everyone to LED Live. Today we're going to talk about influence, but before we get to that, I just want to take a moment to thank our donors and our patrons. You guys are the ones that make it all possible. So we kind of have two, you might say, parallel donation programs. You can donate through our website, you can donate through Patreon. Those links I think are in the description below. So make sure you check those out if you are looking to help us out. You can help us out a multitude of other ways, one of which is prayer. We always want prayer for the things that we're doing. So thank you for all those prayers and thank you for those who are helping make this show possible. Also, we want to let you know that we have digital downloads. Many of the things that we talk about on this show, they are in documentaries that we have made. So Little Light has a history of making documentaries over a period of more than 10 years. So if you check this link out that's on your screen or possibly in the description below, you're going to see all these documentaries that we've made. In particular, the one today would probably be closer to a documentary called Pseudology, The Art of Lying, or a documentary called #Selfie, which is on social media, since we're hitting on the general media topics and a little bit on social media. So make sure you check those out on Vimeo. Also, we like comments. We like YouTube comments. Really, to be honest, we like the nice ones, but we'll read the ones that aren't so nice too. And so we get to as many as we can and answer as many questions as we can that way. Of course, if you have questions, you can always reach out to us on social media or through email as well. And last but not least, we are trying to get this content out to a variety of platforms. And so we have a lot of our content in Spanish, probably not as much as English, but there's only one guy that does the Spanish, so he's a little bit behind. And we have an international channel. And so we encourage you that if you're wanting to help out with subtitling or voiceover or anything like that, reach out to us and help grow those other areas of our ministry. So having said all that, we're going to talk about influence, okay? What's the first thing that comes to your mind when it comes to influence?
Social media.
Okay.
Yeah.
Why?
Because it's influential.
Okay.
I second that.
You second that.
Well, not the reason. I mean, yes, the reason as well, but also because people literally are called influencers on social media.
This is true. Okay. Regine?
Yeah, I agree with
You
what
third
she
it?
said. Yeah.
Okay.
She
All right.
thirds it.
Well, when I was preparing for this seminar I was giving about a month ago, I looked up the definition of influence because I'm like, I don't know, what does the dictionary say about that? What is it? How does it read? So I'm going to lean a little bit closer so I can read it because my eyes aren't as good as they used to be. It says the capacity to have an effect on the character, development, or behavior of someone or something, or the effect itself. The influence of television violence. Now it's using that as an example, like the influence of television violence. So those are pretty big areas of life. When you think about behavior, when you think about character, when you think about development, those are all very important areas when it comes to human beings. So also I want to let you guys know that there is, you might say, a show that we did a couple years ago that's in this same vein. It's called Mesmerized. Have you watched that?
I probably have in the past, but
if you haven't,
there's
you
a
should
lot.
watch it.
Yeah.
It's one that Scotty let out on, and it was one of those shows I remember when we did, and it was really good.
Mm-hmm.
It was really kind of eye-opening to see all the pieces of the puzzle come together. So check out Mesmerized in addition to this program as well. Okay, influence. So Harvard has like a lot of schools, right? One of the schools is Kennedy School. So this is like a public policy school. And they were looking at a particular problem in the world. In Mexico, there was a high level of violence and aggression towards women. And they thought, how can we combat that problem? Okay. So as I was reading this article, it didn't take me long. The very first sentence jumped out at me, just huge. And here's what it said. Media has the power to influence individual beliefs, attitudes, and behaviors. Just straight out of the gate, that's what they said. And I said, wow, that's a pretty bold statement to open with. And so you can tell they're kind of tipping their hand, like, how are we going to tackle the program? So what they did is they used a radio program, and they developed, this program in Mexico and put it on different stations to combat this problem and decrease aggression and violence towards women. And it worked. And it worked because media does have influence, just like they recognize it does have influence and power over people's attitudes, their behavior, their development, their character, all of that. And in addition to that, I thought, well, maybe that's kind of a one-off, but I came across this TED Talk too. Pretty much said the same thing. There was a lady who she felt very passionate about what's called an honor killing. She's from Pakistan, and she's a filmmaker. You ever heard of these honor killings?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So she made a film about honor killings, and we'll put the link of this TED Talk in the description below. So you can...
honor killings.
Wait,
Pro-
what's an
for
honor
it? For
killing?
it?
No. Against it.
Oh, okay.
So an honor killing is when a male member of a family will kill a girl or a woman because they believe that that individual has brought shame to the family. And so that's basically what it is. And so it used to be legal to just kill them in the name of honor, and that was it. And there was no repercussions for that at all. Like, it just gets off scot-free. So this lady, and I'm not even going to try to pronounce her name, I'll butcher it for sure.
Can I ask a question about that real quick?
Mm-hmm.
I had kind of heard of this, but I thought it was more about the idea that, like, if any member of the family converts to Christianity or converts or dishonors the family in any way, they could be killed. Like, for instance, if it was just a mother in the family and her son decided he wanted to convert to Christianity, isn't she, according to that religion?
It may be that way in some countries. I don't know.
Okay.
I wouldn't be able to speak to that. So
You're not Islam or Muslim?
no, not. and this is yeah. Anyway, so she made a film to combat this problem and change people's, you might say, hearts and minds about it. And her film actually won an Oscar. And she took it back to Pakistan and got the support of the governor. And
Wow.
or the prime minister, that's what it was. It was the prime minister. And he's like, I will screen your film. And he publicly came out against honor killings. Well, that was all great, but the next day, one happened, and then the next day after that, and the next day after that. And she kind of realized, we have to take this thing on the road. So they built kind of like a mobile cinema and started taking it through the country. And they had one section even in this truck for women where they had like theater style seating, so they could go in away from the men, so they wouldn't be ashamed or anything like that. And they would view the film and other pieces of film that they had developed to combat this ideology. They seen the power of that working in Pakistan, and they saw pretty dramatic change. I mean, the government passed a law that said it was illegal. So it's pretty amazing how you can use this kind of technology to change an opinion, to change a belief, to change an attitude.
Wow.
So, you guys all have birthdays, right? Obvious question, right? I had one recently. And people on your birthday, they oftentimes like to ask you just before that, what do you want? Right? What do you tell them? Probably different every year.
Yeah, probably. I always thought you'd never tell your wish or it won't come true.
Oh, okay. Well, I guess I never bought into
Almost
that.
got
or
me there.
Nobody
Brittany's
ever
got
taught
a
me that.
secret.
What do you think people ask you that?
So they know your secrets. Brittany?
What is going on?
It's an open discussion. I'm like trying to facilitate discussion. Why do you think people ask you that?
What do you
What
want
do you
for
want
your
for your
birthday?
birthday? Yeah.
Because you're celebrating you, so it's like all about you.
Yeah. Do you think that, I mean, at least as I look at it, people are trying to please you, right? And there's
Right.
nothing necessarily wrong with that. That's just, they're trying to make you happy.
Right.
Oftentimes, social media, like you guys mentioned before, it asks a different question.
Mhm.
And it asks the question, what do you like? Why do you think they ask that question?
They want to know what's in your head
Why?
because they don't know what's in your head.
Well, that's true. They don't know what's in your head. It's actually the fastest way for them to understand you, right? Why is that important?
Statistics.
Yeah. So if you look at your screen, you're going to see some screenshots from TikTok. And you'll notice that on TikTok, when you sign up, they say choose your interests, right? You are selecting your interests for them, right? It gives them the information very quickly. Now they kind of understand you. And what do you think that you're going to see after you choose your interests?
My interests.
Yeah, you're going to see your interests, right? I mean, absolutely. I mean, you've helped them get very far very quickly. You can skip that section, but if you notice at the top of the screen, there's a very small skip button. I've circled that in red. Why do you think the skip button is small?
Because they don't want you to skip
They really don't want you to skip it, right? And so it's small, kind of up there. I mean, Regine knows all about UX, UI. She gets it. So they do the same thing on platforms like Pinterest. You sign up like, what are you interested in? And then you're going to see more and more of what you're interested in.
Yeah.
And that's all they really start feeding you is when everything that you click on is something that tells them they want more of that. And it creates what's called a social validation feedback loop, right?
Is this also the same thing as cookies? Like when you're on the internet and they're like, accept these cookies, and that's how they track what you're interested in?
I mean,
isn't that
cookies
what ties it to Facebook?
do track, but that's not why. This is like, it's two things that work together but are separate. Like them asking you what your interests are is cookies, are probably helping that, but it's not. It's not why
function.
They're asking. Yeah.
Cookies are the box.
Cookies have been around for a long
information.
time.
And what he's talking about is the information in the box.
Yeah.
That's deep.
So
cookies are in the box. Wow.
No, cookies are the box.
Cookies are the box.
There you go.
Okay. So
I'm hungry.
I'm sure you are. Okay, so Pinterest, they do this kind of thing. All these different social media websites are generally asking you what you like because they want to understand you. Now, the reason they want to understand you is because ultimately they're all businesses, right? Mm-hmm. And businesses exist for primarily one reason, and that's to what?
Create money.
Yeah, well, make money. Yeah, the government creates money. Right? Sorry, that's a political joke. Anyway, the longer they can keep you on their platform, the more money they can make, right? I mean, that just makes sense. So, but that means that their conflict of interest runs pretty high, right? Because they just want to keep you on all the time. So there's no reason for them to really do anything that would cause you to disengage, right? So just keep that in mind. You would think that after COVID, digital advertising may have dropped off, but it actually didn't. After COVID, it got even probably more strong. In 2021, there was $189 billion worth of digital advertising spend. It's an incredible amount of money, right? And why are they spending $189 billion on digital ads? Different companies.
Well, I think when COVID happened, everything kind of switched more digitally anyway. We became heavily reliant on that.
Sure.
And I don't think it's changed after that.
Sure. It probably hasn't changed.
Yeah.
But why spend so much money?
Because they know it can influence the way you think.
Okay.
And what you want.
And you're exactly right. And another reason is because they're not just putting that money in there just to serve you an ad, right? They're businesses. They're putting that money in there to get money back. And so if you look at the numbers, you can see that year by year, even though they spend, their digital advertising revenue just keeps increasing. So in 2021, advertising revenue from social media platforms from doing their digital advertising spend was $50 billion. That's what they made. So it's like this. If I told you, I'm going to give you the choice whether or not to make a $200 investment, okay? $200. You put $200 in, you're going to get $250 out. Would you do it?
Yeah, I would get $50.
I mean, Brad the only taker? I mean, it's not a trick question. Of course you'd do it. I'd do it all day long, right? Here's $2,000, right?
Uh-huh.
You'd be spending that money like hotcakes if you knew that money was coming back to you every time. And that's essentially what they're doing. They know it works. They know they're making money off of it. And so they just keep spending the money because the money keeps coming back and they're making tons of money off of it. So basically what they're selling then is your time, or rather they are really profiting from you giving your time to them, right? So my question for most people is, what do you get out of it, right? There's lots of things that you do with your time, but when you spend your time on their platform, what kind of return are you getting for that?
Dopamine.
Yeah, I mean, essentially that's what it is, right? Dopamine. You're not generally getting any kind of monetary return or anything like that. But here, as an average individual, you would say, my time is worth something. And yet here we find ourselves giving our time away to these different companies and saying, yep, here's my time. I'm selling my time for ads to be served to me. So here's something I found pretty fascinating. One thing we see in the realm of media is not just the way that we use our time, but also influence, right? Influence is the reason why China and a number of other countries, they censor American content when it comes to them because it doesn't align with their values when it comes to media. So here's an article from the LA Times, not a small newspaper, not a Christian newspaper by any means, right? And they have an article about Minions.
Minions?
About Minions, the Despicable Me franchise.
Okay.
Did you know that the latest Minions movie was censored in China?
Why?
Why? That's a good question. Why do you think it was censored? Do you have any idea?
I mean, maybe
You probably haven't seen it, right? And
Despicable Me.
Yeah.
I think not the new one, but
Yeah.
I saw like the first one that came out.
Yeah. Not that we're like promoting going watching movies for our employees, right? Yeah.
right.
Of course you haven't seen it. You're supposed to say, yes, I have not seen it.
All right.
Okay.
Yes, I have not seen it.
There we go. So they made this observation in the article kind of right out of the gate. I don't remember if it was the first sentence or shortly thereafter. They said, the Despicable Me franchise is known for flipping the script on children's movies by making the bad guys the heroes.
That's like all movies.
And China had a problem with that. You would think, yeah, that's in a lot of movies, but they noticed it specifically in this. And of course, they recognize the audience level that it's targeted at. It's young children. And here they are, it's like the bad guys are winning. And specifically what they had a problem with, there were no consequences. The bad guys just kind of get away with everything at the end. And China's like, wait, no. That doesn't fly. So they changed the movie. And what they put out to their audiences was that bad guys do time for crime.
So how did they do that? How do you change a movie? Because that would require a huge 3D setup and Pixar in China.
It actually happens all the time.
Money is like, does China pay for that?
Yeah, does China pay
It
Pixar?
actually happens all the time, and sometimes they do. So, for example, Iron Man 3, okay? Iron Man 3, there is a scene where Tony Stark goes in to be operated on, right? Well, for American audiences, they see one thing. For Chinese audiences, do you know what they see? The doctor's Chinese. They swap the doctor out.
Huh.
Okay? And it's actually a very famous Chinese actor that plays the part of the doctor. In one of the latest James Bond films, for example, like Skyfall, so he is shown in the American version, right? In the version most everybody sees, he's shown fighting against people who have, they're Chinese. And it shows him winning. So they cut those scenes out for Chinese audiences because they don't want Chinese people to look weak and easily defeated.
Wow.
So
That's
there's actually
incredible.
multiple films and for different reasons, like the movie Titanic, right? That's probably before your time and
No, I've
probably
seen it.
before your time.
That's a popular movie.
Okay, yeah, it was a popular movie. So Titanic, there's a scene where the Lady Rose is, shall we say, exposed, okay? That scene is cut. Now, they cut that for moral reasons. They don't.
Right.
China's really big on like no nudity and things like that, so they cut that right out. But different things are changed for different reasons. For example, in the one, I can't remember which one it was. It was another Marvel Avengers film with the Manchurian. No, the Mandarin, not the Manchurian. The Mandarin, the character that had a Mandarin. He was an enemy of Iron Man. So the Mandarin is in the comic books is typically a Chinese character. Well,
Mandalorian?
Not the Mandalorian. The
Mandarin?
The
Mandarin is Chinese. I thought it was
Yeah.
a Chinese language.
Right. But the character in the comic
Who's on first?
It's also a fruit.
I'm so confused.
is Chinese.
Okay.
In the movie, when they play the villain against Tony Stark,
Okay.
is a white guy.
Oh, okay.
So different things like that are changed. And sometimes, like you said, China will pay for, and what we're starting to see is Chinese companies investing or partnering in big Hollywood studio films so that they can shape the content.
So,
You know, the irony, I think, in this is that I kind of like China in that because they seem more moral than the United States. But, I mean, there's a two-edged sword to that because then how much force do you want in your country?
right.
You know? So,
Yeah, and I would say that I agree with you. I don't think necessarily the things that they are censoring or doing are always bad. I wouldn't say that, especially when it comes to the moral sensitivity. It's definitely more moral sensitivity there. I'm just pointing out that it's important enough to an entire government to censor a film that not even everybody in their country will see. Right? A few people will see it, but an entire government is like, nope, we do not want that influence here. Cut it out. Change the ending. This does not fly in our country.
Fascinating.
So if it's important to an entire country, what does that say to us as individuals that make choices every day on what comes
Right.
into our minds and what doesn't?
And when we tell ourselves it's just entertainment.
Exactly. Because to the Chinese government, apparently it's not. Now, like you said, it's a two-edged sword, right? So, interesting article. I think this was done in, well, let me look actually. Yeah, 2020. The FBI released a statement in 2020 about China's attempt to influence U.S. institutions. So, and they had a variety of methods. It wasn't just social media or anything like that. They were complaining about their influence at universities and different things. And so, here the FBI is saying, whoa, let's take a step back. We, representing the American government and American people, we have concerns as a law enforcement agency about the influence that China is having on our country. So clearly, governments are concerned about other people and their influence in the country. Right? They think it's a big deal, enough of a big deal to squawk about it. So this statement that the FBI released, the word influence was used 16 times. And it wasn't just like it's in the title and the heading kind of thing. No, it was like they said influence over and over and over and over again because they're a little concerned that China's getting too much influence in our country. And why is that? Well, in the United States, we have generally, it's described as a capitalistic, republic, democratic society, right? And that China is more, they're socialist, they're communist. And so the U.S. is saying, we don't want that here. We're concerned about those values. Anyway, that sword works both ways. And entire governments are concerned about who's influencing who. And that's really the whole point of that.
Wait, I have a question.
Yeah.
Them saying influence in the article 16 times, is that like supposed to be a subconscious thing so that when you think about China, you think of influence? Like
no,
what was the...
I think they're just trying to they're using that word multiple times because it's important. So an example of that is if Jesus says something like 3 times,
Right. Just paid special attention.
he's,
to that.
because he's repeating it, we
Right,
should pay
right.
attention to it. And so in that article, they're not just using it once, they're saying it multiple times, so we should pay attention.
Reinforcing it, yeah.
Yeah, it's reinforcement.
Got it.
So, have you ever heard of this man, Robert, and I'll probably butcher his name, Cialdini? He's Italian, I think. He's a
No.
psychological PhD type, wrote a book called Influence back in 1984. He said some things in this book that I think are really interesting and really describe how people behave. So, one of the quotes from his book reads this way: "We use the actions of others to decide on proper behavior for ourselves." It's a pretty broad statement. What do you think of that?
We use the actions of others
Yeah,
I
to
think
decide
that's
on proper behavior for
to
ourselves.
decide on proper behavior.
I think that's true. I think all we are is made up of learned behavior. When we're young, we're mimicking our parents. We are influenced by our friends, our environment. I think that's true.
And that's not necessarily good or bad, right? It can be both, depending on those environmental variables, right? When it comes to things like social media, if you see a lot of likes or views on something, you're almost compelled to view it because other people have, right? That's where that environmental component comes in that you are talking about. On the flip side, if you're the one posting, then that becomes tricky because it starts to define your self-worth. And we've seen this from studies for things like Instagram, where, you know, people they'll take the same picture to 2 different audiences, and they will, they have a way of inflating, because it's just a photoshopped image. They'll take one and they'll give it lots of likes, and they'll give another one like very few likes. And even though it's the same picture, which one do you think people click on? The one with lots of likes. It gets a lot more likes because it already has likes on it.
So, how do you, or what do you think about, like, now Instagram has this thing where you can actually hide all your likes. So now it's like this person plus others. It no longer shows the number.
I think that's healthy.
Well, I'm on Facebook, and someone clicks like on some comment I made, and well, I go back and read what comment did I say that someone liked. You know, I mean, I think it's natural to want to know what people enjoy, but also they want to know what other people enjoy too. And by that, we learn, and I think that's in and of itself a danger.
Yeah, it's really exploiting, you know, some parts of human psychology is what it is. So I like the way that the Bible says it, though, because we live in this world and there's all kinds of things that have an opportunity to influence us, whether it's from social media or environmental factors or what have you. We have all these influences, but the Bible says, "And do not be conformed to this world," right? "But be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God." Really, you know, we should be discovering what God's will is and not be so concerned or not be subjecting ourselves maybe even to so much of the world's influence, because that can lead us astray if we're not careful. Well, Cialdini also said a few other things that I thought were interesting. He said this: "In the process of examining the reactions of other people to resolve our uncertainty, however, we are likely to overlook a subtle but important fact. Those people are probably examining the social evidence too." It's very interesting, right? We oftentimes look at what other people are doing and think, oh, because they're doing it, they have it all figured out. But they don't, right? They're just figuring out just like you are. But because there's numbers, we oftentimes do the proverbial, you know, if your friends are jumping off a bridge, would you do the same thing? Did your parents ever say that to you?
Yeah.
Yeah, they did. How about yours?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, yours.
Of course.
Yeah, everybody uses that, right?
This also reminds me of, I can't remember which LED Live this was, but there was one that was done like maybe a year ago where there was that experiment where there was like the smoke detector there was a group of people in the room and a smoke detector was going off, and it was like waiting to see Like there was everybody was in on it except one person.
I think that was in Mesmerized, wasn't it?
I forget, but it was
I
less
think
than a year
maybe it
ago.
I think it
was.
might have been. It was more than a
Yeah.
year ago.
Yeah.
More? More? Because I was here.
Mesmerized was, but maybe
No,
maybe we
I
used
don't
it
think-
again.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, and so they were just trying to see who would actually get up
Mhm.
and do something. And what they found was that most people, if they, even though like the building is on fire and
Yeah.
the smoke alarm is going off, they will stay seated with everyone else around them.
Wow.
Yep.
And it also reminds me whenever like I'm scared of like, I have fears of like underground subway trains and stuff.
Okay.
And I was always advised, like, you know that you're okay if you just look at all the people around you. If they're calm, then you're good. And so it's like,
Okay. So everybody be calm for Brittany.
Right.
All right. Well, the Bible also says this. I think this is a great thing for young people, especially to keep in mind. It says, "Let no one despise your youth, but be an example to believers in word, in conduct, in love, in spirit, in faith, and in purity." And there's a whole lot wrapped up in there that we don't necessarily have time to go and flesh out on this show. But when you're young, you can learn to stand. You can learn to be an example. You can learn to weather the influences that are around you. And that's really the Bible's challenge to any young person, right? That learn to stand for yourself, learn to be your own person and not just be influenced by the world. So Cialdini had some principles that he laid out in something he called social proof, is a theory that he developed. And he used these to describe how people behave. Now, I think I was seeing that there's like 7 of them now. I'm only going to go over 4. But four ways that people behave, okay? One of the things that people take into consideration is uncertainty. When you are uncertain about any given situation and what to do you know what people normally do when they're uncertain?
Google it.
They do what other people around them are doing,
Ah.
right? So if you're unsure, just like you were talking about on the subway, right?
Right.
You looked at everybody else and they're like, oh, if they're calm, then I should be calm, because you were
Mm.
uncertain on whether you should
Right.
be anxious or not.
Right.
Okay, so that's the uncertainty principle. Another principle is similarity. So for example, if Brad and I are in a crowd and we were wearing the same clothes and had the same hairstyle and all these kind of factors, I might make my decisions based on the people that were most like me.
Mhm.
Okay, similarity. It could be your ethnicity. It could be your gender. It could be all kinds of things. But we look at other people around us, look for similarities, and then we say, okay, well, if they're doing that and I'm like them in these ways, then that's probably what I should do.
It's like the elevator idea. Step into
Exactly.
the elevator, everyone's facing you, you're going to turn
Oh.
around,
Yep.
right?
Right.
Mm-hmm. So similarity. Another one is expertise. So, the popular example is on TV commercial, you see this expert and it's like, I'm Dr. So-and-so and you should take this medication, Zoloft or whatever, because it's the #1 doctor recommended. You know how it goes. And so people look at that and like, oh, well, the doctor recommended it, so I should do that. And that's a double-edged sword. I'm not necessarily saying there's anything wrong with listening to people who are experts in their field. They more than likely know more about the subject than you do.
On that topic, just as a side note, not
Yeah.
to go down this too far, but it's interesting that doctor recommended thing, actually they get the statistics from this by handing the doctor a bunch of free items from that thing, and then go to the doctor later and say, hey, what do you give out to your patients? What do you recommend? Well, I recommend
Yeah.
this one. Well, obviously, because he has a bunch of
You get the
free
free samples,
free
yeah.
samples, yeah. And so
Yeah. You see that.
4 out of 5 doctors recommend the free samples that they gave out. Yeah, they
Yeah.
did.
So what if they only gave the samples to 5 doctors
Yeah,
and
exactly.
then only 4 recommended?
Yeah, you would never know, right? Or as I like to say, 9 out of 10 people will disagree that one person will, or 9 out of 10 people agree that one person will always disagree, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, lame joke. Anyway, number is also another factor in Cialdini's social proof theory, and he basically said if there's a lot of people doing it, then you're more likely to do it too. You know, if everybody's jumping off the bridge kind of scenario. So I look at all those and I say, do you know where all those come to play in? There's actually a Bible story where all those come into play. And that's with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, right? Would they be influenced by the world? Would they be influenced by the prevailing culture of the day? Or would they stand for God? And I think that test is coming to God's people again, right? They had, they could have had, I don't think they did, but I think when you look at that story, you know, the focus is on those three. But those were not the only ones taken captive from Jerusalem to Babylon, right? There were other Jews that were there. And I think those Jews fell into this uncertainty principle, right? They're like, what do we do? Like, we're in Babylon and like everybody else is doing this thing. Like, I guess we should just bow down.
Well, also what it meant if you didn't bow down.
Well, yeah, I mean, there was a threat for sure.
Heavy threat.
So that certainly didn't help. But then there's the similarity, right? Those other Jews were probably attending Babylon U, you know, and looking at all the other Babylonian students.
Babylon U.
And we're like, man, everybody else from the university is just, you know, is bowing down. I guess I should do that too. You also have the part about not just similarity, but number. There's a lot of people there. A lot of people doing the same thing. You also have expertise. So all the government officials, it says in that chapter of the Bible, it's Daniel chapter 3, all the government officials are up there, right? And what are they doing? They're the ones that tell everybody what to do. That's what they're doing too. They're bowing down just like everybody else. And so you can see how all those factors can play into a scenario. And I think that is what will happen at the end of time. People are going to be uncertain about what to do. Everybody's going to be doing the same thing. You're going to look around you and find similar people just following the crowd. And you're going to find yourselves with all these experts. I think religious experts and scientific experts and experts in all these fields are going to be telling people, this is what we have to do in the end of time.
You know, I think it's interesting because the Bible says, Revelation says that they'll accept it with the hand or on the forehead. And the hand is what you do.
Exactly.
And the forehead is wholeheartedly what you think. So I think it's interesting.
Yeah, for sure. So Revelation 13 parallels that scenario. And so I think that's why we have to be careful about what influences us, what we choose to let influence us, and why we need to learn to stand for ourselves. One more thing I thought was interesting, the San Diego State did an interview recently with a psychologist, and her name was Dr. Jean Twenge. And she comments on how technology is having an influence on young people, right? So here's what she said. Among teens, many users of social media, that is about 5+ hours a day, are twice as likely to be depressed as non-users. Facebook's own research found that using Instagram led to body image issues. We talked about that earlier. For many teen girls, screen time in general, like TV, gaming, texting, is also linked to depression, but not as strongly. So, yeah, TV can inhibit, can lead to depression. Gaming can lead to depression. Texting can lead to depression, but lots more than that is social media. So that's part of its influence. Now, she continued to say in this article, depression rates begin to increase after an hour of social media use a day. But the cure is usually more
shallow.
Sorry, but the curve is usually more shallow for other types of screen time, with higher depression rates only appearing after 3 or 4 hours a day of use. So 2 hours a day of social media use seems to be different from 2 hours a day of TV watching, for example. So not all screen time is necessarily equal, but it seems like social media time, which is probably one of the most influential of all platforms, can really lead to depression. So when I think about that, I was doing some research on this, and I wondered what type of content are people largely consuming on these different social media platforms. What do you think it is?
Memes.
Don't look.
Video?
Okay, video. So think more genre.
Oh,
Memes.
Okay, memes.
genre.
Music.
Okay, music. She's got 2 answers. That's fine.
Mm.
Regine, do you have any idea?
Movies.
Okay. Brad?
Bah, I have no idea. I
No
really
idea.
don't.
You can
Okay.
take one of my answers.
Okay, I'll take one first.
I found this really, really surprising, but it makes perfect sense. So they're depressed, and the top type of content they're consuming is comedy.
Huh.
Memes.
Yeah,
was
essentially like
right.
memes, funny stuff, right?
Right.
Why? Because essentially they're self-medicating,
Right.
right?
That's
If you're
interesting.
depressed, that's a pick-me-up from that, and it helps keep you going, even though you're kind of cycling into that over and over again. So you're looking for a pick-me-up on a regular basis to get you out of that depressive cycle.
Wow.
So,
Oh, that is interesting.
yeah, and it's interesting, but it's also really, really sad to see that, you know, the type of content they're going to on the platforms isn't helping them. You know, they spend more and more time on the platform, they get more and more depressed, even though the type of content they're supposed to be getting is a pick-me-up. So it's pretty sad.
I think what's also sad too is that because social media is so ingrained in our society, like if someone's an alcoholic, you won't just leave them to be an alcoholic. You know, there are steps and things to do about it. But I think people are still trying to discover, you know, how to manage social media. But then it's also hard because then you have so many advertisers on there who do want money. So they don't actually want anybody to get off. So it's like, how do you do that?
That's why I mentioned that conflict of interest
Yeah.
earlier. They're interested in lining their pocketbooks, not
Right.
necessarily helping other people. And there's all kinds of disturbing signs. Like one of the things we talk about in our social media documentary is the fact that a lot of these tech CEOs, they send their kids to schools that don't use technology, at least not for grades 1 through 8.
Yeah.
Like an example of that is a Waldorf school in California. They don't use technology for 1 through 8. Now, once you get into high school, they'll start to use some technology, but not in the early development because they think it inhibits human interaction. Yeah, there's some other things, but I encourage you guys to check out that documentary.
It's called
#Selfie,
Yeah.
and you'll find a lot of interesting information there. But just kind of bringing this thing to a close, kind of wrapping it up. The Bible tells us in Proverbs 12:26, the righteous should choose his friends carefully, for the way of the wicked leads them astray. And I want to just expand on that a little bit. Not just your friends carefully, but also your content, your influence. Because those friends, the way this text is written, those friends are influencing that person in the way that they are going to go for their future and the choices that they're going to make. And in today's world, we spend less time with people, less time with friends, and more time with content. And so I think as a principle, this applies. The righteous should choose not just his friends, but his content carefully, because the way of the wicked will lead you astray, right? So if you're consuming wickedness, it's going to take you on a bad path. And then the other scripture I thought was good in this case was, do not be deceived. Evil company corrupts good habits. Awake to righteousness and do not sin, for some do not have the knowledge of God. I speak this to your shame. So obviously it's only helpful to us, each one of us, to have good habits. And what is that good habits? What do those good habits lead to? It leads to righteousness, right? Which is what we should all be seeking after, right? That's Christ wants to give us his righteousness because we don't have it of ourselves. And that righteousness is where we're headed. You can look at the Bible from beginning to end. And what I think is fascinating is in the beginning, there are certain things that happened. And if you look at the way the book ends, God is trying to restore those things in the end. In the beginning, there was no sin. In the end, God is going to eradicate sin. It will be no more. So in between time, it only makes sense that we would be embracing Christ working in our lives in a way that eliminates those things from our lives, you know? Just because we can experience more of heaven here and now if we embrace that, right? If we embrace Christ's righteousness. It's not because we can do anything. It's not because I'm going to work my way to heaven. It's not because of any of that. It's what God actually wants to give me. And that's a beautiful thing. And the Bible is just encouraging us that, you know what? Those that influence you affect that. And you are only damaging your experience here and now. And it could be so much better. And so I think God is really inviting us to a better experience, a better life. And that's why we need to be careful about what influences us. So again, I just want to encourage all of you, check out this video, Mesmerized. It's probably more exciting than this video. There's a lot of really neat video clips in there, and it really kind of helps drive this point home. This is more informational. I guess that's kind of my style. I love the video clips. I wish I would have found them. But that's a good video, and that's why there's a variety of us here on LED Live. We commit all kinds of information from different angles to help you guys out. And so unless you guys have any other questions or have any other final comments, we're going to wrap this up and let everybody go.
I think I have one.
Okay, shoot.
So we've talked about influence, and now we're aware of influence. So let's say someone is aware of these things and they say, well, you know what, now I'm aware of it. I can continue consuming because now it's no longer subconscious or subliminal. Like, I'm totally aware of it. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, I totally get what you're saying.
So what
and
would
I think
you say?
The Bible text that we just read addressed that. So, you know, if we go back to this one here, it says the righteous should choose his friends carefully, for the way of the wicked leads them astray. It doesn't say, you know, if you continue with your bad friends, it'll be all right.
Right.
It says, no, choose your friends carefully.
Right.
Like, don't go back to those other things, or don't think that if you know the difference between good friends and bad friends, that the bad friends aren't going to influence you. It's essentially saying the opposite of that. It says, no, they're going to influence you, whether you know it or believe it. It's gonna happen.
So what about this? Question for everyone. What if you make a quick mini documentary about this, and you use it to expose something? You use it to show the dangers in a certain music or movie, and you get people that say this, and this is what people have said, that you are, by showing this, you are doing exactly opposite of what you're saying. In other words, if you show the bad, then you are promoting the bad. What do you think about that?
I don't think that's true, because I think that exposing and promoting are two different things. And for a lot of people, you can't really, like, if you don't expose it, they won't know. And I think also what you're showing, what is it centered on? You know, like, I know when we do exposés, we're telling them, like, these things are bad for your spiritual health, for, you know, your relationship with Christ and all these things. We're leading them to Jesus at the end of it. We're not just saying, yeah, guys, you should totally go watch this and it's so cool and stuff like that. So, yeah.
I was going to look up a scripture from Ephesians chapter 5.
11. Expose the works of
And
darkness.
have no fellowship with the unfruitful works of darkness, but rather expose them. Paul is not saying participate continually in those things. You know, he's saying those things need to be brought to light for what they are. So I totally get where people are coming from. I totally understand that. And some people do not, they just don't see it. And I think for myself, I don't think I would have necessarily stopped, just because there was a difference between somebody telling me. Actually, it wasn't even somebody telling me. I knew the things that I was consuming was wrong, but it didn't click, right? And so when I finally had somebody show me like a side-by-side comparison. That's essentially what it was. A side-by-side comparison, and it was like, oh, now the light bulb went on, and it was like, that's why I don't want that. There's a blinding that happens to individuals, I think, where they're it's like this veil that's over your eyes, and you just can't see it. You don't get it. And I think this is one method that God is using to help open people's eyes. And we've had countless people tell us the same thing. If I had not seen that material, I don't think I could have broken away for it. Like, I see it for what it is now, and now I can completely walk away. And it's funny because there are many people who are very familiar with our ministry and our material, and then what they tell us is like, oh yeah, but I haven't watched it for years. I don't watch that stuff anymore. I don't even watch your content. And they have no idea that like we have a YouTube channel or anything, because they've completely steered the direction of their life, and they have different viewing habits, a different walk with God, and they realize, oh yeah, I don't need those things. I don't want those things anymore. For them, it clicked. Is it the right method for everybody? Probably not. I don't think it necessarily works for everybody. Different people are worked in a variety of ways. Just like on this program, there are different people. We know this because they write in and tell us. Different people identify with Brad, or identify with Brittany, or Mikey, or Scotty, or myself. It takes a variety of people, I think, to preach or speak messages of truth, because they speak to different individuals in a different way. And that's only thing I can say is that's the Holy Spirit, working through those different people on different hearts and minds. So I hear what they're saying. I have I guess I'm on this side of it, seeing the fruit in my life and the fruit in others people's lives. And so it's not our joy to just look at darkness.
Right.
It's not what we're trying to do here. So, yeah, or promote darkness. At least it's not, I mean, I can say that for myself, and I think everybody else here is the same way. We're not just trying to promote darkness. It's a call. It's a call to turn. Yeah. So, yeah. Well, thank you all for watching this episode of LED Live. We hope that you have appreciated that information, and we hope that you will share it with somebody else who needs to hear that, and maybe needs to make some changes in their own lives, or even solidify a decision in their life. And so thank you for watching. Thank you for donating. Make sure you check out our cool shirts and hoodies, like the one I'm wearing and the one Brad's wearing. You can get those on lightwear.shop. And we hope that you will have an excellent rest of your day and a good weekend. Take care, and we will see you next time.